God taking us state to state. Catch us Wednesday, Sunday, stats on the buffet. From gridiron to the court, we got the say. Football spirals, hoop dreams in the chat. Chopping it up, deep dives on every stat. Texas to Florida, repping border to border. Arkansas to Bama, the vibe getting warmer. SWAC talk, keep the knowledge on deck. See well spinning, wisdom gotta show respect. Facts flying higher than a wide receiver's check. From football to hoops, what y'all expect? Guests roll through, dropping stories untold. Legends from the SWAC, spitting straight gold. Locker room vibe, secrets unfold. CW heavy like a championship hold. The South's got a rhythm, a culture to match. Each stat, each fact, another door latch. SWAC talk connects like a perfect pass catch. From Alabama skies to Florida's grass patch. SWAC talk, keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday, where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive. Keep the energy alive. Wednesday to Sunday where the legends thrive. Facts and stats sharper than a coach's knife. Ballin' on the mic, that's how we survive.
All right, everybody, what is going on? How y'all doing? Welcome to today's edition of SWAC Talk, the show we cover the SWAC inside and out. Of course, I am your tour guide around the SWAC. See what's coming at you, and we are going to continue this series that we've been doing, where we kind of been looking at the top returning leaders for each team. Heavy with the asterisk. That's become a running thing, but we are coming up to the end. We have one more of these coming up, and that'll be for the specialists, and that'll probably be coming at you next Sunday. We got a couple live shows coming at you this week. Got one Tuesday coming with my boy, Coach 67 Sports TV. We're going to chop it up again, talk some more Southern football. Of course, we got our show Wednesday with Lionel Mosby Jr. from PV versus Everybody. So y'all keep it locked in, man. We got two good live shows coming at you. Then we got our SWAC Smoke show coming at you on Thursday. So y'all keep it locked. Keep it locked there. Hit the socials to get any information on those shows. Facebook, SWAC Talk, Instagram, SWAC Talk, Twitter, SWAC Talk 76. Also, don't forget to like the video, comment, and share your thoughts, and hit the subscribe button on your way in or on your way out. And same thing with the like button. Hit it on your way in or on your way out. It don't matter. It's all good. It is absolutely free. So just get down with the get down. So let's go ahead, man, and jump into this. Again, I'm going to keep doing this disclaimer for the last two videos, but this is pretty much based off of any information that I could gather at this point. If a guy is already in the portal and he hadn't shown it, then, you know, he may still end up on this list, but, you know, you can always take him off if he's gone. Otherwise, you know, we operating under the assumption that everybody on this list is still there. The portal did close on Friday, so, you know, that may slow some things down, but, you know, take it with a grain of salt, and it's all for fun and entertainment purposes anyway, so let's just get down with it. So with that being said, man, the defensive back group returning doesn't really have a lot of guys on it who received postseason accolades. We only have one guy on the list, as far as I could tell, who was an all-SWAC guy this past season. So there is a lot of room for guys to be on that list in the preseason. And there's some solid production returning in this group. Like I said, no big names per se, but there are some very steady guys and guys who have been very key to their teams. A couple of these guys got some extra years, so you know that also helps. But we're gonna go ahead and jump into this. And the first guy on this list, of course, is from Alabama A&M, and that is Marvin Smith. He was the second leading tackler on this team with 63 tackles. He finished 24th in the conference in tackles per game with 5.3. He also was number 20 in total tackles. So he's a guy who really was active and getting to the ball. He finished the season with 63 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, a pass breakup, 2 quarterback hurries, and 2 forced fumbles. So he did a little bit of everything for them in terms of especially getting in the backfield and making things happen. Defensively, this team wasn't necessarily outstanding. They were eighth in total defense, um, sixth in rushing defense, and 11 in passing defense. So there is, some room for improvement. And of course, having Coach Sam Shade take over, that opens up a lot of things. And like I say, for all the teams with new coaches, a lot of this you can definitely take with a grain of salt because, there's gonna be some changes there. I think A&M brought in 32 new guys. So there's room for, improvement. There's room for certain guys to move, but I don't think a guy necessarily that has played in amount of games that he's played in and put in the time that he's put in is not going to be on the field unless something just doesn't work out. But this is definitely a guy who can be a good building block for your secondary. And one of the guys who is a very productive returner for A&M. So there are a couple of those dudes on defense, and we'll see how that goes as we move forward. Next up is Alabama State, and again, this is a defense that took some heavy losses. They lost some big time guys in the secondary, some big time guys just overall. But as far as I can tell, they returned Kane Lewis, who was a second team All Conference guy last season. He's the only guy on this list who actually has a postseason accolade, and I would expect for him to be also on this list, on that preseason list going into the season. He's a senior. He played in 12 games, had 40 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, uh, 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, 1 quarterback hurry, two fumble recoveries, 1 forced fumble, and 1 block kick. Um, that's a guy that's gonna definitely be able to really help anchor this defense. With so many guys leaving, you need some continuity and some stability. And I think he can provide that on that back end of the defense. And I think that helps. Again, they have a new defensive coordinator, but I don't think a lot of the philosophy and the mentality of Alabama State defense is going to change. So I think, there's going to be some little changes here and there. But as far as what this team is known for, I don't think that's going to change much. And I expect him to be a guy who can definitely be a factor in that. Again, the only guy on this list who was an all conference guy. It's not to say that some of these guys who are on this list weren't deserving of that, but there was just a lot of great DBs in the conference last season. So there's a lot of opportunity for guys to kind of step in and, like I always like to say, take that star reign and see where they go. And this is definitely one of those guys coming into it. Next up is Alcorn, and we have Markel McLaurin. This guy actually went into the portal early in December, came back, decided to come back to Alcorn and run it back one more time. I think he did get that extra year. So he decided to come back one more time. Definitely going to be a guy who the Braves count on in their secondary. 41 tackles in 11 games, 3 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, and 2 fumble recoveries. So as you have a defense that lost some key guys, in the front part of the defense, and they lost some solid defensive backs. There's an opportunity for a guy to kind of step in and take the reins and make some things happen. Kind of be a leader on the defense, especially in the secondary. So, I think that a lot of these teams do have those opportunities there, and it's up for guys to kind of come in and take the reins and make it happen. So again, this is a guy who is a senior, and so he's definitely experienced. And again, he's a guy that I can see on one of these preseason lists because he definitely is a guy that can make some things happen when you look at what he's done for this team. Next up is Antoine Watts from Bethune-Cookman. I always look at Bethune-Cookman on these lists as just these are the guys that I heavily ostracize. I don't think that's really a word, but because every time I do something on Bethune Cookman, I look up and another guy's gone. But as far as I know right now, Antoine Watts is still there. He played in 12 games. He had 70 tackles, one tackle for loss, two interceptions, four pass breakups, and a forced fumble. He is the second leading tackler on this list. So again, he's a guy who's very productive, was able to definitely help this defense. But this was a defense that really had their struggles this past season. Uh, I've been saying it the last two shows when it comes to defense. This was a boom or bust defense. Finished the season with 25 sacks, only forced five fumbles, had 10 interceptions on the season, which also was kind of one of those feast of famine type of things. But this was a defense that finished eighth in passing defense at 217 yards per game. They were 11th in rushing defense at 237 per game. They were 11th in total defense at over 454 yards per game, giving up 6.5 yards per play. And they were 10th in scoring defense, allowing 34 points per game. And, this defense kind of got better as the season went on, although they still got gashed, especially on the ground. They just didn't have the depth to kind of stop teams when they was just running at them. And so, a lot of it is the reason why their passing numbers aren't that bad because they were really porous against the run. But if you watch a game like they had against Clark Atlanta, their secondary did have some struggles, especially in that second half, as Clark kind of made a run and pull out that upset. But I think a guy like Watts is definitely gonna step into one of those roles. Raymond Woody III was their leading tackler on the defense, and he was also their leading guy in the secondary. Um, and so, a guy like that put up 80 tackles on the season. He was, he was a leader on that defense. So that's a void that has to be filled. And with a team like this, you need as many guys to step in and take the reins and leadership and production as a whole. And so I expect I have high expectations for a guy like this because, like I said, he's played, he's proven, he's done it. It's time for guys around him to kind of chip in and help out. But Antoine Watts is, like I said, the second most productive guy on this list in terms of tackles. So he's definitely a guy who's gonna be in on a lot of plays. Now, how much of that is because the defense, as a whole, was unable to, get guys on the ground, and how much of that is just because he has instincts and able to get around the ball. That's something that you kind of have to keep focus on because this defense really struggled on third downs, giving up 44% on third downs, and they gave up 36% on fourth down. So they did struggle to get off the field at times, and that's going to always hurt you in games. Next up is FAMU, and they return Jamil Sanders. He's a redshirt senior. A lot of seniors on this list. Pretty much everybody on this returning list is a senior or a grad student, except for I think like one or two guys. So this is a very experienced group of returning DBs, and like I said, pretty much all of these guys have played in a lot of games and have had a lot of production. So this is probably um, one of the more productive returning position groups that we've had on this show, and that shows that there is a lot of talent because some of these guys were playing beside some really great defensive backs. And Jamil Sanders is one of those guys that was around a couple other really good DBs. He had 12 games of action last season, 41 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, one sack, two pass breakups, two quarterback hurries, and a fumble recovery. We've said it a few times already, but FAMU defensively wasn't necessarily what FAMU typically is defensively, although they did give up, although um, they were pretty solid on third downs, giving up 36.5% and 50% on fourth down. They did not necessarily have a pass rush that they typically will have. They registered 21 sacks on the season. They also kind of had a tough go of it against the run per se for them at 167 yards per game. That's not a bad number, but when FAMU was kind of regularly in that top two or three, dropping to seven is a drop. Their pass defense was sixth at 182 yards per game, so still good numbers. Just the perception of what the defense was kind of hamstrung it a little bit. And a guy like this is another guy who can make that preseason list. Definitely, he has the opportunity now to kind of take a bigger role with them losing some really good DBs, and so that opportunity will be there for him. We'll see if he can take the reins and run with it. As the defense seems to be turning the corner. New defensive coordinator, of course, Coach Cozy is going to be more hands on. So there's there is some pressure on the defense to kind of step up and take charge again. And so we'll see if that comes to fruition. Next on our list is Blake Davis from Grambling. Again, kind of stepping in for a really solid guy in front of him, well, next to him, I guess you could say. Uh, and that's just gonna be the what we looking at. But Grambling was another defense that really feasted on turnovers. They were one of the top teams in turnovers, and Davis had 12 games of action, 41 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, a fumble recovery, and a block kick. I like to see those block kicks because I feel like a lot of these guys can help teams on special teams, and so if you can make things happen that way, uh, it's always a great thing. Now Grambling had 15 interceptions on the season, which was tied for second place, but they gave up over 230 yards per game through the air, which was last place. So they, again, a boom or bust type of defense. They had 25 sacks. They just when the ball got in the air, if they didn't intercept it, it was going for a big play. They were actually fourth and third down defense at 34%, and they led the conference in fourth down defense at 30%. Um, they also were fourth in rushing defense at 147 yards, 146.7 yards per game, and they were ninth in total defense at 377 per game. They just struggled when the ball, they just struggled with the deep ball. Teams were able to go over the top on them, and even though they had a run of games where they got some interceptions, um, they kind of tailed off a little bit. And once they couldn't really turn you over, they kind of had some struggles. But they do have some talent on this defense. Obviously losing a guy like Andrew Jones is gonna kind of step you back a little bit, but there's still a lot of talent on this defense, and I think the defense has to kind of take a bigger jump with the offense losing their top running back, the top two running backs, the top receiver, bringing in a couple new quarterbacks. So there is, like I said, there is talent at Grambling, but some of it is not experienced yet, and I think the defense has to kind of take charge a little bit, and that's going to come with being more consistent in the pass game in terms of defending passes and not just getting those turnovers, because turnovers are great, but when that's what you live by and you don't get them all the time, your offense struggles to move the ball. Not having short fields is definitely going to kill an offense like that. And so I would love to see them be more consistent on a down basis through the air and make those plays for their offense. Next up is Jackson State, and they return Shamar Hawkins. He's a senior. He played in 14 games. He had 49 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, and a pass breakup. Uh, his defense still returns a lot of talent from a defense that was either first or second in most categories. They were second in scoring defense, second in total defense, second in rushing defense. They were third in passing defense. They were second in sacks. They were second in interceptions. Excuse me, they were second in sacks. Yeah, they were second in interceptions. They were eighth in forced fumbles. They were sixth in fumble recoveries. They were second in first downs allowed per game. They were second and third down percentage at 29%, and they were eighth and fourth down conversion rate at 57%. So this defense, like I said, was either first or second in most categories. And so, they still return a lot of talent from that list, even though they lost some all conference guys in all levels, but there's still a lot of talent on this defense, and there's still a lot of guys that are gonna step into those roles and make those all conference lists. And Hawkins is one of those guys. He's gonna be one of those guys that can. I don't even know how you make this defense better, but they're gonna be right there. They're gonna be a factor, and obviously they're gonna be the front runner going into the season to win the conference. So there's not a lot of questions on this defense or offense for this team, and they have a lot of talent all over. And Hawkins is definitely one of those guys. He is a senior, so he's very experienced, and he's gonna continue to develop and get even better. And that takes us to Valley, and Valley has D. Shari Keith. He's a senior. Played in 12 games, 29 tackles, one tackle for loss, four pass breakups. This defense, even though they really struggled as a whole, giving up 21 first downs a game, they were 11th and third down defense at 48%. They were 10th and fourth down defense at 60%. So they really struggled to get off the field. They only had 14 sacks on the season, which was 11th. They had 5 interceptions, which was last. They had 8 forced fumbles, which was ninth. And they struggled against they were more solid against the pass than they were to run most times, giving up 218 yards through the air, which was 10th in the league. Defensively, they were last against the rush at 238 yards per game. And they finished the season last in total defense and last in scoring defense. So this was not a good defense, but they lost all their key contributors. So, with a coach like Coach Buckley coming in as new, it's a blank slate. And so, a lot of guys who did play may not be playing. We don't know. And so it's tough to really look at a team like this because there are so many question marks and so much uncertainty that you really don't have any idea where this team goes from here. So I'm not, I don't really put a lot of stock into the returning guys because, with a defense that's not that good, whoever returns may not be a big factor anyway, so it could be addition by subtraction, but it's definitely a situation where, there's going to be new faces, and those new faces are going to have opportunities, maybe even better opportunities than the returning guys. But Keith is a guy who has some action. He is one of the guys with the lower production on this list. But that's primarily because he was behind some guys and didn't necessarily get the reps that he probably should have. Next up is Prairie View, and again, new coach, new attitude, a lot of new guys coming in already. More new guys are coming in now. So, who is where on this team is definitely going to be an interesting thing. And Cameron Franklin is a grad student. He had 12 games of action, 34 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, interception, 3 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. Prairie View defensively, they were all over the place. They were 6th in scoring defense. They were 7th in total defense. They were 3rd in rushing defense. They were 9th in passing defense. They were 10th in sacks by their defense. They were 7th in forced fumbles, 5th in interceptions, and they were 10th in fumble recoveries. Also, they were 6th in third down defense and 9th and fourth down defense. So they were kind of, up and down, but primarily they were a middle of the pack defense. And, they bringing in new coach. He bringing in coaches that he's familiar with, and they are hitting the portal hard and getting guys that they feel like can come in and contribute right away. So every guy that's returning is definitely going to have to work for theirs. And so this is another situation that makes it a little bit tougher to kind of project because you really don't know which way this team is gonna go with some of these returning guys, and so it makes for an interesting spring and it makes for an interesting fall camp, and seeing how these Panthers come out in the Labor Day Classic to start the season off. So not a lot, not a lot of real projections there for this team, but I'm definitely this is definitely one of those teams that I'm anticipating seeing in action. Next up is Southern, and they're led by actually they have two guys that could you could pick which one, but Horatio Johnson was the leading tackler in the secondary. He finished the season with 74 tackles in 12 games of action, one tackle for loss, two interceptions, three pass breakups, and a forced fumble. He is kind of like a duo with Herman Bristol III at that safety spot. They anchor a secondary that returns a lot of guys who played last season, which was a spot where they didn't have a lot of experience coming into the season. So they were a really good uh, unit there, led the conference in passing offense. Passing defense at 152 yards per game. Didn't really get a lot of interceptions. Only had 7 on the season. They gave up 12 touchdowns, which was the second fewest behind Alabama State. Against the run, they were fifth in the league. Total defense, they were third in the league. Scoring defense, they were third in the league. They were third in sacks. They were sixth in forced fumbles. They were seventh in fumble recoveries. They led the conference in third down defense at 28%, and they were third and fourth down defense at 35%. And those numbers, a lot, especially the third down numbers, are definitely a testament to your secondary, especially if you have those passing downs on third down. But also having a really good pass rush helps your secondary out a lot. And this was a group of guys that really were sure tacklers. They didn't really give up a lot of big plays through the air by missing tackles. And so, this is one of those groups that is one of the more experienced groups, and they're probably like that I would probably say like they're second or third um, in that kind of defensive back group behind like Jackson State and maybe FAMU. Um, and even Bama State, even though they took some losses, they still have some very talented guys there. Texas Southern is another group that has a nice secondary, even though they lost some key pieces. They do have some valuable guys there, but Horatio Johnson is the guy who has the most tackles returning on this list. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean he's the best guy because he has 74 tackles, but he's definitely a guy who's involved in his defense. And really, really made some things happen for them in a unit that was young in terms of experience last season, and definitely going to be a guy who is a vital factor to this defense this season. And next up is Texas Southern, and they lost a couple really really key guys, including the All Conference guy and MJ Henson. Um, I found Charles George as their top returning guy. I could be wrong there. 11 games of action, 32 tackles, and a half a tackle for loss. Experienced guy, senior, played a lot, and they have some guys on in that secondary that they're very high on, and so I'm eager to see this group in action. Um, this defense was another defense that was kind of like a middle of the pack, but for a team who we didn't expect a lot from them. A lot of people figured they'll finish at best fifth. They were still, they were solid for what they were. Sixth in first downs per game for the opponents. They were ninth and third down defense at 41%, and they were 11th in fourth down percentage, 61%. They finished eighth in sacks at 2021. They had 10 interceptions, which was eighth. They were third in forced fumbles with 11, and they were eighth in fumble recoveries with 8. Their passing defense was seventh with 178 yards per game, allowing 15 touchdowns on the season, and like I said, those 10 interceptions. That 15 interception was tied for fifth in the conference. So they were really solid there. Their rushing defense was ninth in the league total defense. They were sixth in scoring defense. They were eighth. So they were a team who were kind of in the middle of the pack, but that was fine for a defense that a lot of people had no real expectations for outside of that locker room and that community. I think that, like I said, they have some really good pieces still there, and they have a year in the system, and they coming off of some great momentum to close out the season. So I would not be surprised to see the defensive backfield take another step, even with the losses of the guys that they had. I think they still had the ability to be a very productive group and maybe even have an all conference guy in that group. So I would definitely keep an eye out on this defensive backfield and see where they stand from there. Our last team, I actually had two guys that I put on this list. Um, for different reasons. One is Zach Williams. He's a sophomore. He is the leading returning tackler in the secondary, which took some heavy losses to the portal, just like every other position on this team. He had 11 games of action, 38 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, interception, and 2 pass breakups. And also, I had a Marion Mingo, who's also a sophomore. He played in 7 games and had 3 interceptions, 17 tackles. If he had played in more games, he would been able to um, qualify for the being on the list of top guys in terms of interceptions, but he only played in 7 games, and I want to say 10 is the minimum. Uh, so, well, nine. I guess 9 is the minimum. So he missed out on that mark, but three interceptions in 7 games as a freshman is really great. So, can he take another step? Obviously, interceptions are just like any other form of turnover. You can't really account for those at all times, but all interceptions are not the same. Some of them may be, bad throws by the quarterback. Some may be good plays by the defensive back. Some might be, because you have a guy on the other side that really holds his side. They test you more, and you get more opportunities to pull them in. There's just so many reasons why you could get a bunch of interceptions. But like I said, he would have finished tied for third, tied for third in the conference in interceptions if he'd have had enough action, and if he had more action, he might have actually picked up another interception or two. So it's going to be interesting to see how he takes that next step in his sophomore year, when he's probably going to be counted on more with another young defense. And this defense, it's like beating a dead horse, but this defense really was not that good. Honestly, without being horrible about it, giving up 35 points per game, which was 11th, giving up 426 yards per game, which was 10th. They were 10th against the run at 218 yards per game. They were actually 6th against the pass. So, excuse me, they were 7th against the pass. So they actually, were okay. But when you give up so much yardage on the ground, teams not necessarily going to have to throw against you. They only had 7 sacks on the season, so no real pass rush there. Uh, They did finish the season with 11 interceptions, so they did force a good bit of turnovers, especially through the air. Um, they had 5 forced fumbles, and they really, like I said, their biggest issue was getting off the field, giving up 23 first downs per game. They were last in third down defense at 51%, and last in fourth down defense at 71%. So all those numbers have to improve, but when you constantly have new guys coming in and you can't hold on to the guys you got, you're always gonna be behind the 8 ball in that aspect. So this defense is definitely gonna have some young guys that can step in and play, and they have a couple young guys in the secondary who were productive in the time that they had. So we'll see if they can continue to grow. So that's gonna do it for this show. Um, I'll be back on Tuesday with my boy Coach 67 Sports TV. Of course, Wednesday we're gonna be talking PV football. So y'all come here both shows 8 o'clock. live on Tuesday and Wednesday. Then SWAC Smoke on Thursday, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. And Sunday, we'll finish up this series with our look at the specialists for each team. So with that being said, man, I'm your tour guide around the SWAC. C. Well signing out, and I will catch y'all on the rebound. Peace.